Welcome back to the next episode of the Josh Hall Podcast. And today I have another special guest on. I think all my guests are special. I think I say this every time.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Pull that mic a little closer to yourself. But they are all special because we're all special.
So then nobody's special, actually.
No, that's not how it works. Why can't everyone be special?
Because special means you're distinctive, right? Out of everyone else. And so then if everybody's special, isn't nobody special?
But what if everyone's unique in their own way?
Okay, then everyone's just everyone. If everyone's unique, there's actually no uniqueness.
But if everyone is different from everyone else, which is true, by the way, every person is unique, like a snowflake.
I knew you were going to use that analogy.
But there's truth to it, though, right?
Okay. All right.
Is there not?
Sure. Everybody's special. Everybody's amazing. There you go.
At least my guests, though. Mm-hmm. That's really what we were talking about.
Okay.
Because I only have on special people. So actually, I revert my statement.
Okay. So
only my guests are special. Well, anyway, right. I have yet another special guest on. I'd like to welcome to the show Anna Harmony. And if I had a applause sound effect, I'd put it in here right now. Let's see. So why do I have on? Actually, first I need to turn this mic down. Because I'm already talking louder than I thought I was going to be. Let's see. So Anna Harmony, who are you? That's a good question.
That's a great question.
So I'm trying to think. Most of my guests are... Well, I guess no, that's not true. I've had old friends and new friends. So you're a new friend.
Yeah.
You are not a friend I've had for a lot of years, but I really met you this year.
Yeah.
Through the communication department at Bob Jones as I was working on my master's in teaching. So why don't you tell us what you do and who you are a little bit?
So yeah, I teach at Bob Jones. I teach in the communication department. I have been a faculty member now for 3 years, and before that I was a GA for 2. So yeah, I just met you and the other GAs through, I don't know, I just working alongside each other, and hopefully it helped you guys out with some teaching stuff. And yeah.
So you teach. That's what you said. What do you teach?
I teach OCP, which is basically a senior level public speaking and career preparedness class. And then I also teach organizational communication. And then sometimes freshman speech.
Right, which that's what I was teaching.
Yeah.
Which we covered all that this year, but you're going back to teaching it next year.
Yeah, it'll be the first time in a year I've taught it, which doesn't seem that long, but it feels like it's been forever.
In the life of a teacher, a year is a long time.
Yeah. So I got to get back into it.
Yeah, you will. I will say to everybody listening, Anna is my main teaching influence at this point.
Wow.
Is that true?
Is that true?
I think it might be.
Wow. Yeah. I'm so honored. Okay.
Well, you should be. You've been a big influence. So you did the Comm Masters back a couple years ago, and you were a GA like I was. So I want to open this a little bit with, can you talk about why communication and why you're so passionate about it, what it is? That's my field now. That's your field. And I think it's a great field, but I also think it's very nebulous and abstract and hard to define sometimes. So why are you passionate about communication?
Well, to be honest, I didn't really know what the field was for a long time. And I just kind of thought what most people think, where they just think, okay, public speaking. This is just public speaking. But then as I got into the program, kind of looked at what the classes were, I realized that there's actually so many different elements of communication. There's interpersonal communication, intercultural communication. There's public relations. You get into communication theories, organizational communication, all those things. And one of the reasons I think I get excited about it as a field is because it's all about the way people think and the way people interact with each other, which people are fascinating, as we just talked about. And you think everybody's unique, right?
Okay. I do.
So if that's
my guess, mostly.
That's right. All right. Then learning about the way people think uniquely, but also at the same time, there's things that we have common ground on. And how do we kind of co-create our social reality? And that's all what communication is. And I love that. It's fascinating to me.
So I remember thinking a couple years ago, as I was trying to figure out, okay, communication, what is this degree I'm getting? I was like, well, this is like a combination of like psychology and sociology, but it's more than that. But those are like big influences, right? It's a people degree. It's a social science is what we call it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we're not studying the natural world. We're studying people and what they do. So, but really it's like a study of the external manifestation of someone's inner psychology and group sociology. It's like, what are the actions and that people are taking? What are the words people are saying? How are they interacting with each other? Yeah. Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it even goes beyond verbal communication, like written communication, signs, symbols, rites, rituals, things like that we do every day that we don't think of as being communication, but they're all ways in which we're communicating with other people.
Okay. That's all great. And again, abstract. What is...
Okay.
No, it is. It's awesome. What is the practical application? So like, let's pretend like you're talking to a senior.
Oh boy.
Why? Okay, that's great. How people do things together.
Yeah.
But why should I study that? What can I do with it?
That's a really good question that I probably should have a tighter answer to. But I think, obviously, like on the base level, like if we're talking to high schoolers, like communication is the number one skill that's looked for in employers right now, especially now that we're in a world that's so AI driven. It's going to be more and more important to learn to understand human communication and what makes it distinct, what makes it special, right? Special, unique. There you go.
Keywords of the day.
Good job. All right. So communication is just like, it's a key skill. It's good to learn. And the more you meet people, I think you find that most people do it really poorly. Is kind of what I've found. And so I think it's just helpful on a job level, but also at a personal level, learning to communicate better, but also just learning to understand people. I think you can't go wrong when you learn to understand people better because you're always going to be interacting with people. And even if you're not necessarily like talking to people on an everyday basis, maybe you work remotely and you're occasionally in for a Zoom meeting, still it helps you with an understanding of yourself, why you do the things you do, why you, even like your nonverbals, what they communicate to other people, how you build credibility, how you build trust, all of those things factor into communication. And so I think it is number one because you could talk about how every single field, there's communicative elements in it.
Okay. I think it's good to say that like, okay, if you study chemistry, you can go be a chemist.
Yeah.
Right? If you study engineering, you can go be an engineer. So those, or if you study nursing, you can go be a nurse, right? Those are very obvious applications. Yeah. And vocations. I think for other degrees, it's like psychology. All right. I get a psychology degree. Well, what can I do with that? It's like, well, it's like, it's like backing up a level.
It's not linear like a lot of other things.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's applicable.
Yes.
Applicable. What's the word?
Yeah,
applicable.
Applicable. Well, I think you said it right.
Applicable?
Yeah.
Applicable?
Now I'm questioning everything. We're two calm people. That's really rough.
That's tough. Anyways.
Applicable?
Applicable.
Yeah.
There we go.
I think you can say it either way. I think so.
Okay. Well, we're just going to go with applicable. So anyway, that's what I learned about communication is like the degree in the field is that very useful, very interesting, very helpful, but I have to figure out where to apply it in my life.
Yeah.
So wherever you end up, if you end up in the business world, marketing, whatever it is, it's very applicable there. If you end up in ministry, Oh my stars, it's so applicable there.
Yeah.
End up in education. Yep. So anywhere that you end up that you're working with people, it's going to be an applicable degree. And even maybe the less, I don't know, if you go work in IT, it could still be applicable. Okay. So you said that you teach organizational communication. Okay. Let's talk about that a minute. What is, because I know at Bob Jones, organizational communication is pretty foundational to a lot of what we do there.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
So basically, organizational communication is the internal communication of like organizations. And an organization can be anything where a group of people gather together for like a common purpose. So it could be a church, be a nonprofit, could be a business, which is we talk about a lot of businesses and companies and things like that. And how does communication function within them, but also how does communication actually create them? So we talk a lot about theory, and then later on in the semester, we talk more about how do we apply them and what are some good rules of thumb, good practices for like taking care of our people, because our people are what create our organizations. So there's a lot that goes into that. There's different approaches to organizational communication, which we talk about in the first half of the semester. And then the second half, we talk more about good practices and applying.
So somebody who's skilled in organizational communication can, how would you say it? Make life better, make processes more functional and efficient, and while also caring for the people more, basically.
Yeah. And that's the part that I would say I'm really passionate about, is how do we care for our people? Because if people are what create our organizations and make up our organizations, without people, you don't have an organization. How do we care for them?
So let's make an analogy.
Oh, good. I love these analogies.
So, sorry, I'm laughing. Okay, so if an organization is a car, an engine, communication is like the oil.
Sure.
That like keeps, I know you're really big on cars and engines, but
you know me.
That is, but like it keeps everything running.
Okay.
It keeps things from it keeps friction from occurring.
Yes. Yeah, I think you can.
And also, it just keeps things running more smoothly, and it keeps parts from that's where I was going. It keeps parts from wearing out fast.
Sure.
So
I think you could say that.
So yeah, it's like, okay, it's not a perfect analogy, but
yeah, I think if you get into even like the constitutive approaches of organizational communication, you could say like communication is the car. It's what it creates the organization, but that's getting probably.
Yeah, you've ruined my analogy. Thanks.
Sorry.
Anyways, all right, let's stay on this topic for a minute.
Okay.
Because I want to talk about this. So when I was looking up communication when I was first applying for the degree, because I was like, all right, what is this? I was looking into like some statistics and some history of it, just a little bit.
That checks out.
Thank you. And I remember seeing a couple interesting things. The first one was that I learned that the hot topic of critical theory, okay? I remember learning this. I was like, oh, that's a communication thing.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know this.
No.
All right. And so this is, I think, interesting for my listeners. So let's talk a little bit about what critical theory is. Why is it a hot button topic today? Okay. And then the second thing I learned, and we can kind of circle back around to this, is I was looking at stats of political leanings in departments and universities across the U.S.
Oh, interesting.
And in STEM, it was like 50-50. It was like in STEM departments across the U.S., it was at least close.
Interesting.
And I was looking at this graph, and I was like, "Where's comm?" And I found comm, and it was 99+% to 0. So like Like statistically in comm departments across the U.S., faculty are 99+% liberal leaning in there.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
And so I thought that was really interesting. So as we know, Bob Jones is a unique place, but I don't think Bob Jones was factored into those statistics. But anyways, so I think we can tie these two things together. So what is critical theory? So like the critical race theory, people talk about other things. What is it? Why has it become such a hot button topic in our society?
Wow, that is such a big question. So critical theory, the main idea you need to think of with critical theory is power, right? So
I'm going to pause you for a second. Let me say this. A theory in comm is it's like a lens or like a structure of looking at the world and looking at people and how they interact. So there's all kinds of different theories. Critical theory is one of the more recently developed ones, or maybe the most recently developed communication theory. Is that a good way to say it?
Communication approach, I would say more so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry.
Yeah, you're Continue. Good. So when you think critical theory, you think power. And it has its roots from Marx, and basically talks about how organizations are what they would call sites of domination. So where there is hierarchy, where there is power, there is inevitably going to be oppression and abuse of that power, is what critical theory would say. And so what's really unique about critical theory that's really interesting is you have, in different approaches to specifically organizational communication, the theorist functions differently. So where in some cases it'll be more descriptive or even prescriptive, what you have with critical theory is the theorist takes a more radical approach where their primary reason for theorizing and for pointing out these oppressions and abuses of power are to make change. And because pointing out oppression is a way of making the oppressed aware that they're being oppressed so that therefore they can rise up. Does that make sense? Kind of.
So what's the goal of other theorists?
So when you talk about like classical approaches to organizational communication, you talk about just the idea of hierarchy and efficiency. Their big goal is going to be to how do we kind of create efficiency as much as possible? How do we create companies that flow smoothly and keep the people in power making money? And that's kind of the goal with that. Then you get into more of like the pluralistic approaches with like human relations, human resources, where it's like, okay, so now we ignored our employees for so long.
So basically we were focused on production and efficiency. So we were focused on the output. Yeah. We forgot about the people.
Exactly. Then we're like, oh, we got to think about the people, which even then, can get dicey. And then you get into cultural approaches, constitutive approaches. We won't get into that. But then, one of the important pieces with cultural approaches is they realize that something important isn't just, if we give our employees enough pizza parties, they'll function properly. Because we know that's not the case from what we see. But, actually, organizational culture is important. The culture in the space in which you work as an employee and that you exist in is going to really factor into how satisfied you are at that organization. And then, of course, affect your output, your productivity. So then we talk about cultural approaches, and then you have to ask yourself, okay, but who is creating the culture? And that's where critical theory comes in. And it's usually going to be the people in power are the ones that have the biggest say in creating the culture. And so that's where critical theory would say, all right, we need to point out where power is being used and how it's being used abusively, oppressively, and we need to dismantle it. So that's kind of there's a lot more to it, but that's the long and short of it. Now, I think it's a hot button issue because obviously it's difficult to talk about carefully with nuance, because there's some people would say, yes, I completely agree. We should dismantle everything. We should overthrow everything because where there is power, there will always be oppression. And then there's some people that would say that wouldn't get so nervous about critical theory. They get so nervous of where the end is, the logical end, that they say, I'm not going to touch it at all. So all critical theory equals bad.
Okay. So let's put some legs on this. So, so examples of people who take it too far and say everything needs to be dismantled. Every power is always bad. What's an example of that?
So I would say, I'm careful with this because, so I did my research in grad school about Black Lives Matter. And I wouldn't say the whole of the movement is necessarily like we need to overthrow everything, because especially the people I interviewed are like, I don't necessarily think that we should defund the police, but here's what I do think. And so I think you have to be very careful. You know how I don't like generalizations?
I do know that.
Yeah, you do know that. I don't like to paint things with a broad brush because I think oftentimes you just miss things. So, but I think when you have the people that are saying we need to defund the police, that would be the critical theory end of we need to completely dismantle that power structure for justice to occur.
Right. And then, okay, so at that point we've pushed to the point of saying law enforcement has power, therefore and they're abusing it because necessarily power abuses.
Yeah.
And so therefore if we just dismantle it, if we just deconstruct it, A+, right? Basically.
Yeah.
But then you have the other side, because I think you would say there is some truth to the fact that power does corrupt, right? We know that's true. And so to act like that there's no truth in that, and that existing systems are always perfect is also false.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And I think that idea, you lack a fundamental misunderstanding of people and how sinful we are. I'm like, you think that there's no structure, there's no a capacity for people to abuse power, you just don't understand people, because historically we see that that's not the case.
So then could we say that critical theory can do a good job of pointing out the flaws?
Yeah.
Does it do a good job of, and I know we've talked about this recently, does it do a good job of pointing out or of offering solutions?
I think critical theory's purpose isn't necessarily to offer solutions. It's not meant to say, okay, but here's what I would say instead. It's meant to say we point out the problems, we dismantle the problems, and then everything will thereby be solved. Because when there's no hierarchy, when there's no power imbalance, it's going to be good.
So critical theory is basically saying that the solution is to wreck everything, and at that point, we don't need more solutions. We just need to be happy. And then that's kind of like, I mean, then you're back to Marx.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
then it's like, well, then everybody's on equal playing field.
A world in which we're all equal.
And so then we're fine.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. That's interesting. So again, like with anything, I think that there's a lot of truth in it. And I think that I totally agree with you that just writing it off as false is just a bad idea. And just like, it's just not true. It's obviously not entirely false, but can be taken too far, like with anything. So how can it be utilized well and in a productive way?
I think it's a helpful practice to develop self-reflection and being open to employee voice and employee feedback. I think when you do that, it's really important, and to be aware that abuses of power happen. And that's why you need to set up structures and accountability for leadership. So I think there's a lot of applications of it that can be really, really helpful. One of the parts of critical theory that I find really interesting, and my students know I love to talk about, is discursive closure, which is basically the subtle kind of micro practices that we use often frequently and subconsciously to shut down conversation. So there's different types, right? There's disqualification. So it's saying, hey, you don't get to talk about that because you don't have a seat at the table. So shut up, basically. So
can you give me an example?
So if you were coming to give me some feedback on a way that I could improve my class, and I was like, shut up, Josh, you're just a GA, sit down.
Right, because I'm not at the level that I need to be. So
that'd be disqualification.
Okay.
Yeah. Or I might just say, you haven't been teaching long enough to understand. Or you could, things like legitimation, like appealing to the higher power, like, well, that's just what it's like here, so I have to do it because that's what my boss or what the company's telling me to do. Or
it's just the way it's always been done.
That's more of naturalization. So you're kind of putting something into the natural. This is the way it is. It just is the way it is. I use an example with my students from Devil Wears Prada, which I know you haven't seen. I haven't seen that yet. But there's that last final car scene where Miranda Priestley's talking with Andy, and she's like, what if I don't want to live the way you live? And Miranda's like, everybody wants this. So she's normalizing and naturalizing her actually really bad behavior by saying, this is the way it has to be in our industry because fashion is cutthroat. So therefore, I have to be cutthroat. So we use that a lot more than we would think we do. It just, this is the way it is. This is who we are as a company. This is just our values. And so you use that to shut down employee voice. So I think a practical application of it can be, are there ways in which we are shutting down, even in churches, are we shutting down our congregants' voices? How do we respond to feedback? Do our pastors have accountability systems set up for them? How do they respond to that type of feedback? And I think that can be a really good and helpful practical application of critical theory.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you apply it because I like that you have a positive goal for it and that it's not just tear everything down. Like revolutionize, burn it all to the ground, and like that's the end. Like I think it's a tool. It's kind of like critical theory is kind of like a wrecking ball a little bit. Used wisely, it's good. Used too much, it's just destructive.
Yeah. And
so
I think,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think there's certain topics that you can't cover without talking about power. And so that's why I think it's important is if we ignore the discussion of power, we're ignoring half of the problem. So I think things like I told you, I was doing my graduate research on Black Lives Matter. I knew that my methodology had to be something rooted in critical theory because I can't talk about racism and BLM without talking about power. It's almost impossible. And so I think that there's times where we oversimplify different social issues because we're not talking about how power imbalance actually affects our interactions and our mindset.
Yeah, I think I agree with you a little bit.
A little bit.
I think that power is also an oversimplification. Okay. Like, I think it's a good one. I don't think oversimplifications are always bad, but like, you just can't, again, you can't take it too far. So like looking at the world through the lens of power is useful, but there's more to the world than that.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
So like, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I don't think it's everything, but I think if you don't talk about it, you're missing something big.
It's a big thing.
Yes.
Yes. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even since talking to you a lot, like it's a useful way to think about it, but I think it can get misapplied, and it has gotten misapplied recently. And so people are skittish in the conservative world, in the right wing world. People are skittish of these words: power, critical theory, revolution, those types of things.
Simple things like that. Anarchy. I don't know. Dismantling the system.
but not bad. It's good. Okay. Can you talk about what critical race theory is? Because that's the term more people are familiar with. So can you talk about where it came from and what you think of it?
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know enough about critical race theory to really give an educated opinion. I'm very cautious about that. Sorry. I wish I had more for you. That wasn't really
No, that's okay.
My research.
Is it, do you know anything about it? Like, do you know, like, is it just critical theory applied to race?
I think so. I think, like, at a general level, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't feel confident enough to speak on it with authority.
That's fair. Okay. All right. Well, that's who you are. So
I am critical theory.
That's what you do professionally. Talk about what else you do.
Like in general?
Yeah.
In life? In like, what do you mean?
Talk about like your church and like your ministry life and all that.
Okay. So me and my husband serve at Christ Fellowship Eastside, which is a church plant in Greenville. And yeah, we've been serving there for about 2 years. Before that, we were at another church for about 8 years. He's the worship leader at our church, and we've both been doing music since basically we met. We actually met at a worship team rehearsal. So it's what we've been doing for forever. So usually on a given Sunday, I'll be playing bass if you see me. But that has fluctuated over the years, just depending on what they need. And then Chris will be leading. And then we both are just really passionate about mentorship. And so we meet with people pretty regularly and are very involved in that way. But yeah, we love it. It's good.
Yeah, it's another one of our connection points is that we both play bass.
Yeah.
Randomly.
The best, honestly.
Awesome. We've never played bass together though.
Yeah, that's crazy. Why haven't we?
I don't know. It's hard to have two basses in the room. Okay. So you talked about mentorship. So I want to connect a little bit. I want to connect your teaching, your professional life, and your mentorship. So tell me about how you view your students. Being a fellow teacher, I love talking about this kind of thing. How do you view your students? What are your goals for when you're teaching? What do you want them to walk away with? What do you want to leave them with as a teacher?
Great question. Yeah. So as fellow human beings, like they're image bearers. And so I try to treat them with that respect and love always. Do I always succeed? Not always, but that's usually my goal. And then I think for my field specifically, I teach like a lot of public speaking. And so I'm just aware that when students come to my classes, usually they're dreading it. And they're like, I don't want to get up in front of people. So my goal as a teacher for those classes is just how do I get them to feel comfortable and safe and create an environment where they feel okay to make mistakes and get up. And we talked about this today, but like take up space and feel confident to speak. So that's kind of my goal. And there's lots of other little goals. Like would I love to get them to the point where they can use research really well? Yes. Be able to organize their thoughts? Absolutely. But at a fundamental level, I just tried to make them comfortable. In organizational communication, it's a little bit different. It's not as much a public speaking based class. More, I want to open their eyes to what communication actually is and how the theoretical approaches impact their day to day. But yeah, and then in all of my classes, I think a common thread is I really just want to expand their mind so that they are able to talk with people who think differently than them in a civil and respectful way. In a curious way. If I can make them better learners, then that's my goal's been accomplished.
How do you go about making people more comfortable and feeling safe in your class?
Well, do a few things. First of all, I think I'm a generally I think this. I don't think I'm a very intimidating person. Like I'm 5'2" and I have a baby face. So that kind of already helps. I'm pretty warm with my students. I make a lot of jokes, and I think that already just kind of helps take the edge off. I do a lot of what I call BYOM days where they bring their own mug and we do tea, play a lot of games, activities, try to use examples that are relevant to them, that they understand, that they'll enjoy. And then I think a big thing that's a goal for me personally is I really care about making every student feel seen. Because I always felt like I was a very forgettable person, especially as a student. I'm like, my teachers don't really notice me because I'm never going to be the loudest one in the room or the most charismatic. And so if I can make every student feel like they have some meaningful interaction with me where they feel cared for, then my job as a teacher is been accomplished.
Yeah, I have, with my own year of teaching, I saw... Even going through college, I saw how some classes I would sit in and it was dead.
Yeah.
It was like nothing was happening. No learning was going on. The teacher was just droning on and he or she hated being there. Ugh. We all hated being there.
Oh, yikes.
And like I saw those, and then like, and then I would sit in classes where it was not that way.
Yeah.
And I just remember having like, I like, it was just became like a pet peeve of mine. I was like, it's not that hard to make class. It doesn't seem like it's that hard to make class an enjoyable time where people learn stuff. And like, but then I remember like the worst classes were the ones where students would try. They would like, they would raise their hand, they would ask a question, or they'd make a comment, and if the teacher would shoot them down, which would happen often, of like, oh, that's like that's dumb, or like, here's why that's wrong, obviously, you know, with that kind of attitude, like it just created like the worst environment possible for learning and for like growth.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so I remember just thinking to myself when I became a teacher, I was like, that's the last thing I want to do. And so I would try really hard to take people's opinions seriously, to take their questions seriously, to take them seriously as a person. And this is what I talked to my Sunday school teacher about on my last podcast episode, which you should listen to, and all the rest of you should listen to if you have not yet. But we were talking about how even like in a Sunday school class with young people, like taking them seriously and realizing that they're more intelligent than you think that they are is like that's the key, like that's one of the keys. And when if you treat your students like they're children, they're going to act like it, but they're also going to like lose respect and stop paying attention. Right. So yeah, I just think that that's such a huge thing, is to take people seriously, to listen to them, and to just show them that you have some respect. Yeah.
I think you're responsible as a teacher for creating the culture of your classroom and protecting the environment of your classroom.
Because you have the power.
Yeah, exactly. It all goes back to power. But it's kind of true. Like, you create that culture from the first day, and from the first thing that you say, they decide how they're going to feel in that classroom. And so it's really important that, and I like what you said about the way that you view them and the way that you treat them is in turn how they'll respond and how they'll act. And that's actually, that's a theory too. We talk about McGregor's theory X, theory Y leaders, and how one type views their people as being competent and they find their fulfillment in the work that they do, versus the other type of leader thinks their employees are lazy and selfish and they're always going to try to get out of work. I think if you view your students that way, that they're always going to try to sneak past me and do as little as possible, and they don't care about the topic, they don't care about me, you're going to treat them that way, and they will then become that way. And so,
well, I mean, I've even seen that in workplaces.
Yeah, 100%.
And like my most enjoyable work experiences have been where I knew what I needed to do, like expectations or whatever were clearly communicated, but then I was left to do it.
Yeah.
So like, and the reason why that's effective is because it's respect in the final analysis. Is it's your employer, your manager saying, I respect you as a person enough that like you can do this, and so here's what I need done, and so just do it and get it done by like and like hopefully by this point, you know what I mean? But like, and then the worst work experiences are the ones where you have a boss or a manager who they can't relinquish the control, and the reason why that is bad is because in the end it feels like you don't respect me enough to let me do my own work.
Yeah.
So it's like the same thing that you can do it with students.
Absolutely. So yeah, just in the end, just have respect for people. Right? It's
right?
really
is that what it comes down to?
Yeah, and they're really sensitive to that. Like especially as Gen Z, I feel like they're the most sensitive to that of any, I mean, I would think of any generation, because they're not content to just say, you're the teacher, so I'm just going to sit and listen because you're the teacher. It's, I want you to respect me as a person and I'll respect you, which is kind of fair.
Why do you think Gen Z is that way?
There's a whole lot there that we could talk about, but I think increasingly as the generations have gone, the power distance has gotten smaller, which is a very calm term, but basically our view of power. So you've got the baby boomers. I think they have a larger power distance where it's like the people in charge, I'm not going to question them. I'm not going to make suggestions. I'm not going to give feedback. I respect them because they're my boss, and at the end of the day, that's it. But then as you have a smaller power distance, it's like, well, I want to respect you because you're someone worthy of respect, not just because you have a title, which I think can be a good thing. It means that you'll probably have some more behavioral issues in your classroom than you may have in the past. which I understand is a struggle. But at the same time, I think there's greater opportunity for better relationships with your students because they see you less as just a teacher and more as a person. And so there's more opportunity for mentorship.
I think it goes the other way too. I think as a teacher, you can see them more as people and less as just students. Okay. Let's talk about this because this is fascinating. And we can look at this through the lens of power. Sure. We'll do it your way.
Yay.
So boomers, starting with boomers. So the power distance is the highest, and then it probably decreases a little bit, like just in the way that they view themselves and the way they view their workplaces and their education, all of it. And then it decreases as we get closer to now. Okay. What's the catalyst for that, do you think?
I think it could be a lot of things. I think, for one, organizations have changed and workplaces have changed, and that's a big deal. Schools have changed. I also think technology.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go.
I knew you were. I had this feeling.
You stole my thunder.
But yeah, technology. I feel like we have more access to powerful people than we ever have before. That's why we had this conversation the other day about it girls and are there and are there actually any it girls today? And
can you just define that term really quick for the listener since we brought it up?
So basically it was I can't remember exactly the decade that first came to be. For some reason in my head I'm thinking like 40s, 50s, but I might be wrong on that. Maybe 60s. But the idea of like, that's the girl that has that magic factor that makes her magnetic and people want to be her. So, there's been like different it girls throughout history. But then when you think of today, it's like, who are the it girls? There's really not. There's no mystery anymore because we have so much access to our celebrities through social media.
And everyone.
Yes.
Like politicians.
Yes.
Sports players, celebrities.
Exactly.
Actors. We know a lot more than we ever have.
Exactly.
Right.
So then by nature, the power distance gets
smaller.
It
feels smaller. And it is smaller. Yeah, I know that I have a book. I haven't really read the whole thing, but there's this whole idea of like the iPhone, the smartphone, social media has put more power into the hand of the individual than has ever been had before. So it's kind of like, it's like it's like as much of a revolution as like the Gutenberg press was. So that like the Gutenberg press made the printed word available to the masses. And a lot of people say that more than anything was like the spark of the Reformation, because you had the Catholic Church, again, talking about power, which had all the power, had all the say of what God said, and nobody could read the Bible because it was all in Latin and nobody read Latin. So they just had to trust the interpretation that was being given to them. But then the Gutenberg press enabled the Bible to be printed in the common tongue and distributed to the masses, and so people could start reading it for themselves. That puts the power in the hand of the masses. And so then all of a sudden you have the Reformation happen, which is when people are like, yeah, we're not Catholics anymore. We're going to do our own thing. And so that like really like I think that this is definitely true, that like the last 20 years we've seen the same thing happen, where the power of the press, the power of information has been put in the hand of the individual who has a video camera and an ability to distribute that footage or your own opinion or whatever at the drop of a hat. And like that makes for a wild world, but like it means that the gatekeepers can't keep the gates anymore. Yeah. And so again, the power distance shrinks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which kind of goes against critical theory a little bit, because
okay, all right,
it means that actually we are evening out. Power distances are getting smaller, not bigger.
Okay.
That was a good point, wasn't it?
You can't just say that was a good point. It doesn't make it a good point.
I only say it when it was. Anyways.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So like, going back to the generation thing, which is where we started, I think you're exactly right. That Gen Z going into Gen Alpha probably feels more empowered.
Oh yeah.
As like individuals, even though I know that like depression and all that is high, but I think I do see that too, that young people feel like they have the ability to do something. They just don't always know what to do, which I think is where the depression comes from a little bit.
Yeah.
True. But I think it's very interesting how like millennials kind of grew up without the technology and the internet, and then it came around when they were in their 20s and 30s. So I think Gen Z and the next few are the first ones to have grown up with this new world that we all live in, which is very different than the old one. Yeah. And so we're still finding out what that means. What does it mean to be somebody who just has grown up with the technology that we have now? Anyways.
Yeah. And they're hungry for connection too, because even being as connected, quote unquote, that they are, they want it so much more because they realize that that's superficial. And so even you see that in the classroom, they're like, I don't want to just know that you're my teacher and be content with that. Like, I want to know you as a teacher. So like, I have a lot more students that actually want to know me on a personal level and are intrigued by like the stories, the random stories of my life, or like what my favorite color is or favorite coffee is, just because they want to know me. They want actual connection from the people over them. So, yeah.
Any other catalysts of a shrinking power distance?
Off the top of my head, well, I feel like with globalization, the world also feels smaller. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so I think with the world feeling smaller, and also the people in charge, they don't seem as, again, mysterious. I think that's another thing. I'm trying to think. Yeah. That's what I
think we about covered it.
Yeah. I think we figured everything out as per usual.
Every time me and Anna talk, we solve all the problems.
We just know everything.
Can we talk a little bit about what we were talking about yesterday?
Oh boy.
And I just want to touch on this for a minute, but since this podcast has been about communication so much, how can you, as a Pelican people, use communication to create a better future for both themselves and others? Can they?
That is a huge question. I mean, I've kind of hinted at this several times in this conversation, but communication has constitutive power. So like communication makes up our social world, right? We have relationships because of communication. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't otherwise. And that doesn't always have to be, like I said, it doesn't always have to be verbal. It can be written communication. And honestly, most of our communication is nonverbal, but that's still communication. So we not only create our present social reality, but I think you do impact the future through your communication. I think one example of this, and we've talked a lot about this, but our perception of self is shaped by the communication that we have with other people. We figure out who we are based on what other people say about us or to us or how they react to us. We decide like, oh, that was a weird thing for me to say or do because of how other people react to it. Which is all communication. We decide, oh, people like me. I have a lot of friends, therefore I must be a likable person, right? Through communication. I think a lot of the ways in which we feel about ourselves, in comms, sometimes we'll call it like the looking glass self, like the way that we form our perception of self comes through the words and things that people say about us and to us. So you're probably if I was to say, hey, Josh, describe yourself in 5 words, chances are all of those words will have come from other people at some point. Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. So
probably.
So, and I also probably, maybe.
I don't know. I couldn't think of 5 words right in the moment,
but. So I think, and then your perception of self affects how you behave and ultimately what you decide to do with your life and with your future. Right? Okay.
So then how can I use my communicative abilities to make that future self better and to make other people's future selves better?
I mean, we talked about this at like a very base level, and it sounds kind of cliche, but like kindness, encouragement, affirmation. People need affirmation. I think if you know you have a gift for it and it's something that you're able to do well, like, do it, use it. I always tell people, I'm like, if you think something nice, just say it. You know, I can't tell you the amount of times we talk ourselves out of saying kind things because we're like, that'll be weird if I tell that girl in the Starbucks drive-thru that she has great skin. But chances are, I mean, sometimes she might think, wow, that's weird. But that might be an off chance. But, you know,
I think I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't do that. Okay.
But yes, I understand the example.
Right. But you can like really shape someone's perception of self and who they believe themselves to be in a positive or negative way. So I even think about that with my students. I'm like, how can I make them feel seen by pointing out the strengths that they have? And ultimately, like, I can see them get more confident as I tell them, hey, did you know you have a great voice for speaking? Like, that might be something that you didn't know about yourself, but like when you get up there, you have a very authoritative voice, and I love that. Or like you have a way of relating to your audience that's really unique and it's really special, and I think it makes people trust you. So I try to use those opportunities as much as possible to say, hey, this is something that I want you to know about yourself so that you can then leverage this for the future, and that it factors into how it affects your confidence and how you then speak to other people beyond that.
You said a minute ago, it sounds cliche to say, be like, oh, yeah, I'll say nice things. But like, it sounds cliche because I think people underestimate the power of it.
Yeah.
Oh, there's power again. And then, in a different way. And then they think of the wrong thing. So being nice is not saying untrue things.
Yeah.
Right. So giving telling somebody that like, I don't know, like, oh, you did such a great job. Like, it's so vague, and like, or like, oh, like you look nice I don't know. Like, sometimes being nice can be so vague that it doesn't mean anything, or we can start saying things that are not true, which people know when you lie to them, and that's not helpful.
No.
So, but I think when you speak truth that is specific and encouraging, pointedly, that's the powerful stuff. And so like cultivating that in yourself of like, I'm an honest person and you can take me seriously, and like, but like, here is what's true about you as a person.
Yeah.
And framing that in a positive way. It's more powerful than people realize. And I said this on the last podcast too, but like I heard one time that it's amazing how little encouragement people need to be encouraged. Like how little it takes to encourage someone.
Yeah.
And so if you can develop that skill, like the skill of encouragement and affirmation, like that, like there's enough power in that to last a lifetime.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I think you can even ask people, depending on like what their career is, and say, why did you start doing that? What got you interested in that? And chances are a lot of times it goes back to somebody actually told me I was good at this, or I was good at some element of this at some point in time. Like, that's true for me. True for me. Right?
Yep.
I wouldn't have gone into education if someone hadn't sat me down and been like, you're actually really good at this. I would have been like, oh, because I never thought of myself that way. So
same, honestly.
Yeah.
Teaching's like, I say this all the time, but teaching is the only thing that multiple people told me I should do.
Oh, really?
So like, I think that's true. But anyways, but like those people who said those words, they said that communication kind of shaped my future.
Yeah.
Without knowing it.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, there you go.
So communication changes the future.
It does.
Yeah.
It's constitutive. It shapes our present and I think our future reality.
It's really good.
Yeah. Tell me about
this. Could be more, but we'll save that for another time. Anything else you'd like to say? Any wisdom you'd like to leave the world before we close it up? We're almost at an hour, so.
Oh, good for us. Yeah, no, I don't know if I really have many words of wisdom.
What would you say to young people, even specifically young women, because that's kind of not your field.
Yeah, but honestly.
Like, it's like your passion.
Women are my field.
What would you say to them? If you could, if you could talk to the whole world right now, what would you like to? What message would you like to leave them with?
I'm saying this because we talked about this today, and it made me think about it. But like, don't be afraid to take up space. Just both with what you say, what you do, and even just physically, like just at a very base level at public speaking, take up space, move around, like be confident in your body and yourself and what you have to offer the world. Because I think too often we're told as women to just make ourselves smaller, and you're allowed to take up space. You're a human being and you're here for a reason. And you being comfortable in who you are and what you have to offer other people it's a gift. It's a gift to other people. So learn how to leverage it, leverage what you have, and don't be afraid to take up space.
Don't be afraid to value yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have value. Because you know why?
Why do we?
Because we're all special, Anna.
Oh boy! It all just
to take it full circle. Hey, that was pretty good. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. This has been really fun.
Hey, thanks
this
for
was
having
a good
me.
conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad we did this. Finally.
All right. Until next time. Bye, everybody.